Before this video starts, I just wanted to say my thoughts go out to those who were affected in the recent earthquake that has affected both Turkey and Syria. More than 11,000 people are officially gone, and there are estimates that that number is even larger. And there are still tens of thousands still missing. I've left a link where you can donate to the victims of this awful tragedy in the description. Life can often be extremely cruel, but this is when we as human beings can forget our differences, come together, and help those in dire need. So if you are able to, please donate to this important cause. A lot of things haven't been going Manchester City's way as of late. Despite inquiring and finally filling in that role of an out-and-out striker with Erling Haaland, the citizens have actually lost the same amount of times already as last season. Not to mention, they just saw left-back João Cancelo leave on loan to Bayern, a player who just 1 year ago was one of their best performers. Even more recently though, they missed out on inching closer to the top after losing to Tottenham away. Again. Which now leaves them in seconds with 4 losses in the league currently. But these issues aren't the end of the world. Pep will eventually figure things out, and Manchester City will be better than ever before. Manchester City and rule breaches, a combination that goes together like milk and cookies. A few days ago, the Premier League released a statement that accused Manchester City of alleged breaches of Premier League rules. Now, we'll talk about that in a bit, but for right now, I want to go down memory lane, because this is not the first time Manchester City have been found in the same predicament. City's shady dealings actually go farther back than you think. If you watch the Manchester City Legacy of Failure video essay, you might be familiar with an old story about Billy Meredith in 1905. Basically, Manchester City and Aston Villa played on the last day of the 1905 Football League season, and Billy Meredith, a forward for Manchester City, tried to bribe an Aston Villa player £10 to throw the match. That way, Manchester City would potentially beat out Newcastle to the league title, but the player refused. Aston Villa won 3-2, and eventually Meredith was reported to the FA. As consequence for his actions, Meredith was suspended for about a year and a half, and during his suspension, Manchester City refused to pay him in order to basically appease the FA. But that bit them in the ass, because in retaliation, Meredith then exposed Manchester City of illegal payments to players and staff. The FA quickly investigated and found out that Manchester City had been overpaying both their players and staff. From there, the club was fined over £900 and was also forced to auction off their players. That's when most of their players, including Billy Meredith, were bought out by bitter rivals Manchester United. Then we fast forward all the way 100+ years later to 2014. Man City were found to have breached UEFA financial fair play rules after posting combined losses of £149 between 2012 and 2013. And in that monitoring period, UEFA allowed total losses of just £37 million. As a result, City were fined £49 million, £32 million of which was suspended. They were also limited to £49 million in the transfer window and just 21 players in the Champions League squad, as opposed to the normal 25. Then in February 2020, UEFA dropped a massive bombshell by banning Manchester City from the Champions League for the next 2 seasons, on top of a €30 million fine. This was after City were found to have overstated sponsorship revenues between the years of 2012 and 2016, totaling over €200 million. Leaked emails from German magazine Der Spiegel in 2018 showed that City shirt sponsor Etihad had funded just $8 million of the yearly $67.5 million it was supposedly worth. Where was the rest of the money coming from? The owner's pockets. The issue here was that FFP limits how much an owner can intervene in club losses, and what the owner did here was try to disguise his own money as funds from Etihad.
I take your dirty money and I slip it into the salon's nice, clean cash flow.
However, in the end, Man City appealed to the Court of Arbitration of Sports, and with their Avengers team of lawyers, the ban was lifted. CAS stated that UEFA's charges were time-barred, basically meaning that it was outside of the 5-year period. Although, City were still fined $10 million for not cooperating in the investigation. Man City won big that day against Europe's football governing body, basically clearing them of any suspicion. However, the Premier League were starting to cook up their own investigation into the email leaks. They started their deep dive into the dark way back in December 2018, back when the emails had first been leaked. Then in July of 2021, it had emerged that City spent months refusing to release documents to the league. They then spent more months objecting to the arbitration panel the league set up. City lost the argument and then appealed against the panel once again, only to lose again. That was a year and a half ago, meaning the Premier League has been going through a thorough examination of Man City's accounts since. Which now leads us back to present day. After a 4-year investigation, the Premier League has charged Manchester City with more than 100 breaches of rules that required the club to provide accurate financial information that gives a true and fair view of the club's financial position. These breaches span out between the 2009-2010 season all the way to the 2017-2018 season. To really show you how long ago that was, Daniel Sturridge had just left for Chelsea, and Manchester City's most expensive purchases that year were both Carlos Tevez and Emmanuel Adebayor. The Premier League has accused City of not providing accurate financial accounts reporting breakdowns of profits, losses, and revenue streams. City have also been accused of having not disclosed full details on how much Roberto Mancini was paid during his managerial tenure between 2009-10 and 2012-13. This refers to a leak by Der Spiegel that exposed City for paying Mancini a chunk of his total salary via a fake consultancy contract with Al Jazeera Club, another football club owned by Sheikh Mansour, the owner of Manchester City. Man City are also accused of not fully disclosing details of player contracts between 2010-11 and 2015-16. They also allegedly breached the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules from seasons 2015-16 to 2017-18. These rules are basically like UEFA's financial fair play, but much more lenient. Other breaches include ones we've already talked about, like the overstated sponsorship values between 2013-14 to 2017-18. In response to these allegations, City came in quickly with their own statement saying they were, quote, surprised by all the alleged breaches they were accused of.
I have no knowledge of any of this. This is so bizarre!
City also stated they were confident in defending against these allegations and look forward to putting the matter to rest once and for all, which I kind of find funny because in Section 5, it literally shows that Man City are still refusing to cooperate in the investigation. It should also be mentioned, by the way, that City will not be able to appeal to the Court of Arbitration of Sport. This is due to the fact that CAS is a Swiss-based court and they do not have jurisdiction in England. So in order to determine a verdict, the Premier League will create their own panel. This verdict probably won't be reached for months and honestly maybe even years, because judging from how Manchester City have refused to cooperate in any investigation thus far, I fully expect them to stretch this one out as much as possible, especially with the fact that it's 100 breaches. But if it turns out to be true that Manchester City have been cheating on this high of a scale, it will absolutely tarnish the already awful reputation this sport has thanks to our higher-ups. I don't think we'll see attendances drop exponentially like they did in Serie A after Calciopoli, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lack of trust drives away a ton of fans from this sport. But if found guilty though, possible punishments we could see Manchester City receive include a slap on the wrist, a massive fine, suspension for individuals who may have broken the rules based on evidence, even suspension in the league, meaning City would have to forfeit matches during a certain period of time. The more extreme ones include points deductions, and even relegation from the Premier League. There are even rumors that City could have their title stripped from them, which would be kinda hilarious considering that also includes the infamous 2012 title. Now, what do I think is gonna happen if Manchester City are found guilty? Let me demonstrate.
Bad dog. Bad.
I like to think of myself as an optimistic person in pretty much every aspect of life, excluding sports and especially sports business. Let's be honest, alright? Manchester City, with their insane Avengers team of lawyers, will find a way to limit and reduce the consequences. Do not be surprised when on October 8th, 2034, after Manchester City have pushed this far back and they've won another 8 titles and maybe a Champions League, maybe, they are simply fined 10 million and are told never to do it again. I think the farthest by extreme levels in terms of Premier League would probably be a small point deduction. That's about it. As funny as it would be to see Manchester City in the championship, it's not gonna happen. This league is not gonna be willing to sacrifice that amount of value and that amount of their fan base to do the right thing. They're just not going to. Even if all of City's players disperse to different Premier League teams, it's not gonna happen. You still have a gaping hole of a fan base right there, even if some do decide to move to Newcastle United. All I'm saying really is, don't get your hopes up. Which is sad, because if City walk away barely punished, unscathed, this will just encourage more and more clubs to cheat, especially the rich ones knowing they can get away with it. Sometimes I really think to myself, how many generations until club football starts to fizzle out? Because with parity shrinking exponentially and authenticity dissolving before our eyes, why would anyone want to watch that in the first place? The Super League, all the way back when they first formed in 2021, that was actually almost 2 years ago, crazy, they stated that football was dying. And I agree, but not exactly for the reasons that they state, like younger audiences not being interested. Because while that might be a tiny bit of the problem, it doesn't cover the entire problem at hand, which is the fact that rich people have stolen this game entirely and are continuously ruining it at very scary rates. What once was a sport that could bring everyone together of all classes has kind of shrinked into a battle of the billionaires, really. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think down below. Do you think Manchester City will have a little slap on the wrist, or will they actually be relegated? Let me know. Of course, a massive shout out to all our patrons, including Janos Barash, El Favi, Miliway009, Aldipu, Alex Rod, Ulta, Amin Suamez, Aresan, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Juan Leras, Miguel Munoz, Nguyen Dim Min Tang, Return Fire, Saw, The Motor Drive, Tomkis, Vanilla Mexican 17, Victor, Chris Damasceno, David Dunn, Declan Malloy, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Paricio, Jordan Clavet, MX Weeb, Niche, Patrick Barley, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course you can follow my semi-active Twitch. But until then, I'll see you guys.